Welcome to Conservation Nation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. In this series, we travel the country to highlight conservation in action. This episode, we're in the Pacific Northwest to investigate why there's a movement to breach the 4 lower Snake River dams in the Columbia River Basin. This region heavily depends on hydroelectric power, yet environmentalists argue removing dams will save critically endangered salmon. But is dam breaching actually sustainable? I intend to find out. The Pacific Northwest is sought out by many Americans for outdoor offerings like the scenic Columbia River Gorge and famed Lewis and Clark Trail. One popular spot in the region is Bonville Dam, an active hydroelectric station 40 miles outside of Portland, Oregon. This project opened in 1937 and is now a National Historic Site managed by the Army Corps of Engineers. Visitors here can learn about clean energy produced from this impressive infrastructure project and see salmon and sturgeon. Hydroelectric dams boast a 24/7 baseload, produce zero emissions, and are a boon to local economies. Despite their innumerable benefits, 4 lower Snake River dams in the Tri-Cities face demolition, or what's more frequently referred to as dam breaching, if the Biden administration and some bipartisan members of Congress get their way. The Columbia River Basin Initiative would allocate $500 million to breach these dams and pivot federal funding to unreliable solar and wind replacements. Congress, which has sole discretion over dam removal, won't approve it anytime soon. I spoke to local radio host Rob Francis, State Rep Mary Dye, Todd Myers from Washington Policy Center, and Kennewick Mayor Gretel Crawford and her family to understand the implications of dam removal here in the Tri-Cities.
There's been more than one economic impact statement that have said the dams can't be removed. There is no alternative to replace that power. There's no alternative to replace that barging. The alternative is over 150,000 semi-trucks going on the roadways. Now, it's interesting because the federal government in the last couple of years has allocated billions of dollars to retrofit dams around the country so that they can produce hydropower to go along with the, for lack of a better term, green energy agenda. So if it's good enough to spend billions of dollars to retrofit older dams for hydropower, why tear these 4 out that are already supplying it? The arguments against the dams aren't logical. The arguments in support of the dams are not only logical, they're pragmatic, they're practical, they're environmentally conscious, they're industry friendly, they're economically beneficial, and they're not driving a singular agenda. They're benefiting an entire community and a region.
It's part of something that's going on in our culture, really, where we have activist groups rise up and try to grasp at power to try and do something that overturns or overthrows systems that we've become accustomed to or find essential in the progress of our society generally writ large. So I think it's a broader picture than just why are people attacking an energy source.
Most of our electricity comes from hydropower. There's no other state that's like that. People think of the Tennessee Valley Authority and things like that were built. Way more was built in Washington State. And so something about 70% of our electricity generated in the state is from hydro. That gives us some of the lowest rates in the country, but it also gives us some of the most flexible energy because dams can ramp up and down so rapidly that when the wind disappears, when the sun goes down, it's the dams that can replace that electricity.
Breaching the dams would have a huge impact on our whole region.
Without the dam's presence, I don't think we would be functioning. It was a 2,500 acre dryland wheat farm. And then when the dams went in, they put water in the early 70s. It's just awesome soil and just perfect for orchards. And we use so much water on the orchards because for frost controls, irrigating and cooling in the summer when it gets really hot.
They're trying to put windmills on more of our ridge lines. They're putting more solar in. It's intermittent, inefficient energy that we don't need.
Not only would energy efficiency be jeopardized by dam breaching at facilities like Ice Harbor, the regional economy and salmon conservation efforts will suffer as a result too. A final environmental impact statement released on July 31st, 2020, determined that while, quote, breaching of the lower Snake River projects would have major long-term beneficial effects to resident fish in the Snake River, end quote, it would also threaten Washington state's grid reliability.
The dams are not about salmon. Removing the dams is about controlling the energy grid. Salvaging the salmon has been an ongoing process, and it has had significant success. Fish ladders, they've done a tremendous job in allowing juvenile salmon to bypass the dams. They've had a 97% success rate. The returns over the last few runs have been above average.
As much work as we've done on the fish, and after seeing in real life the removal of the 4 Klamath dams and how many fish are floating belly up along the shorelines, I question their motives. We've invested over $100 million for a state-of-the-art bypass flume that then has the options for biologists to decide, do we want to put them on barges, do we want to put them on trucks, or do we want to keep them in the river? And they can manage those small fish so that they aren't put in front of the birds and the mammals that eat them before they have a chance to get out into the ocean.
So we've had to do a lot of upgrades on the dams to make it so that they're reduced mortality. But we're now to a point where at each of these dams, between 96 and 98% of smolt pass successfully. So you're getting a very high percentage. So if you tear down the dams, what are you getting in terms of improvement? You're getting something between 2 and 4% at each dam. That's not nothing, but it's very small, and there's a lot of other factors that are bigger, that are doing more damage to salmon, not just in the Snake, but across the whole Pacific Northwest. And so the notion that simply spending tens of billions of dollars to tear down the dams will solve all our problems is naive or disingenuous.
After learning about hydroelectric dams and their importance to the region, we ended our journey exploring Mount Rainier National Park. Mount Rainier, part of the Cascades Range, stands well over 14,000 feet and is an active volcano. At the time of our visit, snow still blanketed the park and made our visit more magical. The Pacific Northwest has benefited from hydroelectric dams for multiple purposes. For locals, the effort to free the Snake is a solution in search of a problem that will leave people and nature worse off. Will environmentalists heed the federal government's own recommendations against dam breaching? That remains to be seen. Thanks for watching this installment of Conservation Nation. If you liked this video, please share it far and wide. And be sure to stay tuned for new episodes coming soon.